What was your worst dating app surprise? I was living in KY and got a message one night from a lady in Texas. She said she was from the town I was living in, not my hometown, and wanted to know if we knew each other since we were the same age. Said she wanted to come back home for a visit but had burned some bridges when she was younger and didn't feel welcome. I told her if she wanted to come, I would pick her up at the airport and she could stay in my extra bedroom. No expectations whatsoever. She came, spent the night. She's not someone I would even be interested in. I was only being a friend. The next night I went to work. Came home and she was in the extra room with the door closed. I went to bed. Waking up Saturday morning, she had the door slightly open but appeared to still be in bed. Decided I would wait until she said something or came out. She finally called my name when I passed by and asked me if I would open the door so she could talk to me. I did. She said she wasn't feeling good. Told me she was having an emergency and was apologizing for leaving a mess all over the bed and floor all the way to the bathroom. I told her that she needed an ambulance. Was she okay if I called one? And asked her if she was going to go with them if I did. She said she would, so I called 911. The ambulance came and took her to the hospital. I cleaned up a mess most of the day until it was time to go to work again on Friday night. Came home after work. Heard nothing from her and her stuff was still in my house. Saturday morning I get a call. The guy says he's her brother. He said, "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but X passed away in the hospital last night. Her sister called me the next day and we arranged for me to get her stuff to her." Another sister emailed me about a month later and said she'd been a terrible drinker for most of her adult life, and it had destroyed her digestive system. Gave up dating apps after that. Met the wife shortly afterwards. I guess you could say she left quite an impression. Story 2. Long time ago on OkCupid. Come across some cute goth girl. Seemed like we had a lot in common. Hit it off real quick. Found out she lived in the same apartment community as me. Decided to meet at her place after talking for maybe 2 hours. She was easily 150 pounds heavier than her pictures. Should have noped out of there immediately, but I didn't want to be rude and she was like a few buildings down from me. I went up to her apartment and it smelled. The only furniture in the living room were 2 full-sized mattresses plopped on the floor in different spots. Stains and cigarette burns all over the carpet. Empty bottles and several plates of half-eaten food strewn about the floor. There was another larger girl laying on one of the mattresses with a half-dude that looked like he was stripping, giving her a back massage. There were 3 other guys in the living room playing New Vegas in a box TV that was on the floor. There were maybe 5 or 6 cats roaming around. She sat down with me on the other mattress and almost immediately jumped into talking about intimacy. Was heavily implying that she wanted to fool around with me in this stained and bare mattress in front of all these people that looked like they'd been up for days. Told me her roommate was messing around with some guy she just met in the bedroom, but we could go in there when they were done if I was too shy. While we were waiting, she told me that they throw these extravagant parties every week and they love to recruit strangers for them. Wanted me to come by for their next party. Got serious serial horror movie vibes from the whole thing. Texted a friend to call me with some sort of emergency to give me an excuse to get out of there ASAP. It worked and I went out of my way to avoid that section of the apartment complex ever since. Story 3. I invited a guy over for Netflix and chill for the second date. The first one was super successful, so I don't mind letting him over. I welcomed him to pick the show and he picked Big Mouth. Really not my thing, but okay, let's try. 5 minutes in and there's a brief moment on screen and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't like this. Let's watch something else. He said okay, and we watched Sal's at Work for a bit, but ended up turning off the TV to chat more. He tells me he's a f*** several times and I'm open-minded. I'm not a f***, but I date nerds. It's par for the course. After he tells me probably the 3rd time he's a f***, I realize he wants more than okay cool. So I say I'm not a f***, but I've looked into it and watched a YouTube video on it. The video cited as CP for the furry community with loopholes of you don't know their age. It said the majority of the furry community also disowns it. I tell him as long as you're not into cub, I could care less. He says, well, I actually am. And I'm like, whoa, I must be misunderstanding some factor here. You wouldn't just admit it to your second date. So I asked him, what do you mean by cub? He pulls a picture of a very accurate, obviously drawn with cat ears and no hair. I'm just shocked, like going insane. What's the guts to do that on a second date? I send him home because it's getting late and ask my friends, could I possibly be missing something or did a second date just admit that to my face? They're all like, Yeah, that's just that. Cool. I don't mess with that, obviously. I texted him not to contact me again, and he comes to my house again. I tell my roommate the situation, and he guards the door with a bat. He's knocking and yelling and wants to talk, then collapses on my porch. He has a sleep disorder, and it's like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Fahrenheit is freezing, without a coat. I call the cops to explain the situation, and they call an ambulance for him and help escort him off my property, and tell him not to come back. I reported him for CP and never heard from him again. Story 4. My sophomore year in college, I was talking to a girl that went to a university about an hour away. After a few months, she invited me to her 21st birthday party to go out with her and her friends. She says there's going to be a big party and I have to come. So I decided to make the trip with 2 of my fraternity brothers. We show up to the party and it's only my Tinder girl and her 2 roommates with no one else inside. Awkward as heck, but the 2 roommates weren't going out or drinking that night. So me and my buds try to make the best of it. We try to start beer pong, flip cup, quarters, you name it. But I kid you not, the birthday girl doesn't play because drinking games are illegal. My jaw dropped to the floor and I knew I had messed up. So me and my brothers hit up our fraternity's chapter at this university and they said we're welcome. After some convincing, we managed to get my Tinder girl to come along with us. Somehow my 2 friends managed to get a little ahead of us and we started to leave the complex. As we're walking, the Tinder girl sees cops and flips out saying how we're going to get in trouble and we need to go back. Keep in mind, she just turned 21 and we have nothing on us. So my friends keep going to the party and I couldn't ditch her because that's where we're supposed to stay. So I take one for the team and go back to her place. We end up watching the Lizzie McGuire movie. Things start to heat up and I begin to think this wasn't so bad after all. Wrong. She informs me she's on her time of the month and refuses anything farther than a makeout. I try to convince her, but nothing. Then she tells me she can do a little trick for me that will make me happy. I have no idea what the heck she's talking about, but I say go for it. Then I got a snap from her after a few hours when we made it back to my university. It was her and her 2 friends with a rubber that had fallen out of my pocket sometime that night. And it gets better. Over 2 months after that whole episode, without any contact, she messages me and asks if we're going to be boyfriend or girlfriend or not. I have never Tindered since. Story 5. She had just one picture in her profile where you couldn't see any features at all, and it could have been taken anywhere on the planet. Somehow I still matched and we started writing for a few days. She told me that she hadn't had romantic encounters for years and didn't want to send any pictures, phone beforehand, or even send a voice message. I jokingly asked her if she is, in reality, a dude and want to steal my kidneys after luring me into a dark alley, and she jumped on the train and joked. Her jokes felt too specific, though. She said, well, maybe I was a dude. And after that, she joked about similar stuff. We still ended up meeting IRL. I decided in a crowded place since it was a bit weird. There was this small woman and she was really pretty, though dressed a bit boyish. We went for a drink and I told her jokingly that I'm surprised she didn't turn out to be a guy, and she asked me how I would know that. I stated a few things and she immediately replied, which in hindsight may be too much knowledge, your voice is definitely female. You exercise your voice. You don't have an Adam's apple. Nowadays, they can be surgically removed or hidden. Not sure what she exactly answered, but those look real to me. Could be hormones. They were smallish. Nonetheless, I had great fun and we ended up at my place, where I saw her, and what I saw that moment was a woman from head to toe. She declined, though, and was really sensitive to me not getting close to her. I wanted to start right away with the action, which didn't work out right away since my buddy had a nervous fit. She tried to help. She asked about 30 times if I liked her melons and what I think of them and if I find her pretty. The weirdest thing about the whole ordeal was that I couldn't get the insert angle right. I know every woman is built differently and I have my fair share of comparisons. Never had an entry angle that weird. After that, she immediately asked if I could call a taxi because she wanted to go, and wrote to me after that she felt bad and that we should leave it at that one meeting. I was baffled since that never happened to me, and I treat every woman with almost respect. I never slept with a converted woman, and especially not with one post-op, so I do not know how it feels, but something in my gut didn't feel right about her behavior and her physiology. It wouldn't bother me to know if she was converted, since that person was in my eyes most definitely a woman. But not knowing and wondering is so weird. Story 6. Weirdest one. I matched with this girl. We talked for about a week, and she's really cool. Most of our talking was over Snapchat, and she had sent a bunch of snap pictures, etc. This was a long time ago, and back when sending fake pictures and fake snaps wasn't really a thing. No one really knew how to do it, so if she sent a snap, you could be pretty sure it was them. I asked her if she wanted to meet up for dinner, so I get to her house, which is about 30 minutes away, to pick her up, and I'm sitting out front. I waited about 30 minutes outside her house, and she's just not coming outside. So I text her and say I've been waiting for a while. I'm about to leave, What's up? She texts back and says, hey, pull around the back so she can come outside. She doesn't want her family to know she's leaving. I go around the back, and it's like the shady alleyway with a long driveway, and I was already weirded out, so I was like, no, I'm not doing that. If you want to come out and we go to dinner, then come out front. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave. So a few minutes later, she comes outside. At this point, I had already invested, like an hour, and it would be another 30 minutes back, so sunk cost fallacy and all that. But when she comes out, it's definitely not the girl that I'd been talking to, or at least getting snaps of. But the weird thing was, the girl that came out was even cuter than the girl I'd been snapping, so, kind of weird, but okay, whatever. So we start heading to the restaurant, and she gets a call. I can hear her arguing with somebody or whatever, and when she hangs up, she says, hey, can we go pick up my sister? She's in trouble. At this point, I'm a little weirded out, so I'm like, I can take you wherever you want. If you need to go help your sister, but I don't want to get involved. She pushes a little more to go get her sister, and I insist I'll take her where she wants, but I'm not going to pick her up so she can go eat dinner with us. She starts yelling and screaming and asking why I tell her I don't know her and this whole situation is weird in the first place. I say, do you want me to drop you off? She calls her sister and tells me to drop her off where her sister is. So we got there, and there's nothing where she told me to go. It's just a street where she gets out of the car, still yelling and screaming at me. Later that night, I look at Snap, and it's her and girl I'd been talking to, and they're in my home city. I don't know if they just wanted to ride to where I was or if I still have never figured out what the whole deal was. Story 7. Matched with a girl on Tinder, and she was absolutely gorgeous. Funny, tall, worked as an aerospace engineer, and lived in a very nice part of town. I know myself well, and it's not adding up in my head where she's interested in me. Like I'm 8 out of 10, but she's quite honestly pretty perfect. Go on the date, and it's honestly one of the best, if not the best date I've been on. Conversation was flowing. Food was amazing. We definitely connected so well. Went back to her house to drop her off, and we made out at her door. She said she wants to let me spend the night, but she's not ready. Invites me over Friday night. I think everything is great, watching a movie. She says she's going to the bathroom. I'm watching the movie and realize she's been gone for like 15 minutes. Then she comes walking down the hall in this full-on catsuit. Like legit thousands of dollars invested in this lifelike catsuit. Has claws, moving ears, fur covering 60 to 70% of her body. I ask her, what's all this? And she explains that she can't go off unless she's wearing it. So I'm like, screw it. Maybe I'll love it too. She had been so open and vulnerable and so kind since I met her that I was willing to try. She started kissing and scratching me, and I was just like, ow, okay. And she started meowing, and I'm like, Jesus, come on. So at this point, I'm trying to get this over with ASAP and start meowing louder than her, and she's totally going crazy and loving it. She just holds my arm and just lays there, shaking. Just wait, don't touch me. I'm standing there for about 5 minutes. She lets go, takes off her suit, and cuddles me on the couch. I'm kind of over this, so I'm just watching the rest of the movie. And she falls asleep in my arms. So I'm like, screw it, and fall asleep. I wake up, and this woman's first words to me, staring me in the face as I open my eyes, are, will you marry me? And I'm just like, oh no, that doesn't seem like a good idea. She's super upset now, and I'm just trying to calm her down. But you were so into it last night. Yeah, just for you. I wanted you to have a good time. She told me to get out, didn't hear from her for a month, and got a text asking if I was sure I didn't want to marry her. Story 8. This is a while back. Technically not an app, around 2008 to 2009. Using Craigslist personally to meet girls in New York City. Meet up with this chick and take her to a play I had to see for school. Dog Sees God, Confessions of a Teenage Blockhead. This girl is kind of that pale white Eastern European. Average looking, had a homely, cute look going on. I was interested. But her personality is off. She seems unsocialized, communicates poorly. The few times we talked on the phone beforehand, she came across more shy. Could tell she hasn't dated a lot or she doesn't know how to socially interact. It was just awkward as hell. After the play, I wanted to talk some more, so we went for coffee. On the train ride downtown to a Starbucks that's by a train station that we could both use to get home with our respective trains, she's telling me how she doesn't have a lot of friends, and the friends she does have, they use her and are not really friends, it sounds like. It's really putting herself down, and she tells me how her immigrant parents are the same way and don't really have any friends. But yeah, just a real pity party, and it shocked me how uncomfortable it was. I vividly remember looking around the train, and I swear, people that were listening to us were giving me looks like, dude, get out of this. Thing is, this was New York City, so I dated other girls that were first or second generation from immigrant parents, but they were usually much more socialized than this. Like it was 100% talking with somebody who was unsocialized. I don't remember it being talked about as much back then, but nowadays, I would have thought she was autistic or had Asperger's or was on the spectrum. I had dated enough by that point that I just knew that this was stuff you don't talk about in the first date. The kind of stuff you sprinkle in through the coming dates if it goes that far. And quite frankly, I thought she was cute enough that I was still interested in getting through this awkwardness and see what happens. We get the coffee and things are better from what I remember, and we make plans to see each other again. Later in the week, she calls when I'm walking over to a buddy's house. We talked for a bit, and I let her know that I was making plans for a date for later that week, and made sure to see if she was available on that certain day. When I get to my friend's house, I have to let her go and told her I would send more exact plans for a date the next day. She wanted to talk a bit more, so I stayed on the phone, talking for an extra half hour to call my friend to buzz me in. Well, this crazy weirdo instead decided to send me an email explaining how evil I am and how I was leading her on and wasn't really interested and was acting like her friends. Like, again, what kind of friends do you have? Remember her saying something like I should have talked to her instead of talking to my friend? Mind you, she called me and I let her know I was walking to my friend's place, so couldn't talk that long, and that I was planning to talk to her the next day about the date. For that, she put a hex on me. I was freaking hexed. I was kind of scared for a sec, thinking, did she follow me home? I knew that wasn't possible. I lived in Brooklyn, and we met up in Manhattan around 59th Street because that's where the subway was. I'd just never been told like that before. I had a hex put on me, so it sticks out in my mind. I know people have been through much worse, so I know it's not much, but for a younger me, it was a little scary. Story 9. Met a woman who had pics boarding an airplane at some tiny airport in what could have been somewhere in Myanmar. She was tall and exotic and looked very similar to Tia Carrere. We planned to meet for Thai food and then see a movie. I borrowed my ex-wife's car, which was a new bug, with very interesting butterfly artwork all along the sides and very obvious. This will be important later. I parked at a large garage facility nearby and walked to the spot. She sent a text that she was outside and very cold because she wore a miniskirt. I had visions of Wayne's World Tia after that message. I showed up and the woman was not the one in the picture. Maybe she was already on the plane and she took it. Needless to say, I didn't want to be rude, so we sat down and had dinner. It was very hard to get anything out of her. None of the interests we shared seemed to be interesting enough for her to discuss. I had to cut my losses and abort the date. So I told her I realized I needed to catch the last train home and we would not be able to see the movie. The last train wasn't for a few hours, but she apparently had no idea. I walked her to a bus stop and she told me that I could come to her place and hang out with her family. Mom, grandma, and baby. Happy that I escaped, I jumped in the aforementioned VW and began to exit the garage. It has exits on all sides and I chose the wrong one. She was right there when I pulled out and stared right at the car. I think the car was so amusing that she didn't even notice me. Began my drive home and got a text. No hands-free in that car, so I had to wait until I got home to read. I figured it was her saying she saw me and I was a schmuck. Nope, the text just read, "Too bad you had to go home. I would have done you." If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 10. She said she was half traveler and half Russian. We talked for about a month before things started getting weird. She was getting random ads from random fake accounts, messaging her, "You'll never love him like I did. Why are you taking him away from his daughter?" It sounded weird, but she said she got stuff like that all the time, so not to worry about it. Eventually, we arranged for me to go down and see her. She lived about 1 hour and a half away. On Saturday, I got a message from her on Friday at 1 a.m. saying that her dog had collapsed and he needed emergency surgery, which he didn't make it. I understood because we FaceTime a lot and I saw how bad of a state it was in, so fair enough. I called it off because she needed time to grieve. She phoned me the next day saying how sorry she was that she had to cancel and she was clock blocked by her dog. Turns out her parents went out the same day and bought her another dog, the exact age, gender, and color of the original. But then the random ad started again, saying the same stuff, and she has had enough and somehow tracked down my ex and phoned her, screaming down the phone saying stuff like, "You don't mess with a traveler. I know where you live." My ex phones me and tells me about what's been said. She doesn't want to lie, so I believe her. Plus, say what you want about my ex, but don't threaten the house where my daughter lives. I found this girl where she denies everything, but eventually she flips the switch and goes full crazy and threatens me with this and that. I blocked her so fast after that, but my ex couldn't just leave it at that and somehow track down her Facebook where she isn't half traveler or Russian, just a common as many women catfishing people from all over for whatever reason. Also wanted to throw this out there. She was taking pictures of a random guy and calling him her ex and saying how crazy he was while telling me about the son they had together. Sending pictures of a random kid to other people to claim as her son. Story 11. Matched with a chick who was out drinking with friends. Said she'd be down to come over right then and there. I said yes, obviously. She shows up buzzed and I provide some more drinks and we're hammered pretty quickly after that. While doing the deed, I did it pretty quickly and fell into the sleep limbo. Next thing I know, I'm getting the Christ smacked out of me to wake up so that we can continue having intimacy, which I look at her like, what the hell? For a moment, before attempting to continue even though I had just finished. She proceeded to continue to wake me up 3 more times when I slipped into sleep, till I finally kicked her out at 5 a.m. and went back to sleep. The worst part is, she stole my favorite shirt on her way out. Another girl immediately began telling me her life story and decided that I was to be her therapist, boyfriend, and husband all rolled into one. We did it on the same night we matched, and it led to months of extreme attachment issues, saying she loved me and wanted to live with me after we were done with the first night's escapades. Yet another horrible hygiene. We dated for a month or so, and she could not, for the life of me, figure how to wipe her clean. When we would shower together, there would be a brown trail running from her head. I'd asked once, "What is that coloring from?" She said, "It must be my hair dye." Her hair was bright red. And another, I had not 420 friendly on my Tinder bio, government job, and a girl that matched with me. Sent a paragraph text about how it doesn't matter if my job doesn't let me. She could always do it before seeing me. I don't have to do it, etc. I reminded her that my job doesn't allow it, so I stay on the safe side and don't want to be around any of that stuff. She got mad and told me I was missing out on so many women because of it. Just unmatched and carried on with my day. I'm married now. Reading all these posts doesn't make me miss the dating scene whatsoever. Story 12. 2 come to mind. The first time I had tried back in the days before apps and it was all websites still, I'd matched with several people, but none of them really responded or anything, but one nerdy person. Now, I'm a huge nerd, but I'm aware enough to not dive into talking about D&D and such, which I mention only because when I told some friends about it later, they said that that was probably why everything happened, but no. And in fact, they were the ones that brought things like that up themselves. We messaged a few times there and I was visiting family and making the long drive home at night. Before leaving, I asked if it would be okay to call and chat for a bit in the drive. For the entire 4-hour drive and for a few hours later, we talked. It was insane. They seemed to be into a ton of stuff that I was, and though I'm usually terribly anxious talking to even people I know, there wasn't a bit of that feeling for the entire 6 hours. Eventually, I had to get off the phone since it was like 2 in the morning, and I said I would call sometime later, or could we meet in a date somewhere? They said absolutely. We got everything set up. Met later that week at a restaurant. They jumped straight into something we had talked about before. It was great. I hadn't been that excited meeting someone in ever. We were leaving and we talked about going somewhere else in town. We had both got to the restaurant separately, and they said they would drive where we were going as well. They told me directions. I left first and turned out of the parking lot to head that direction. They instead turned the other way once I'd pulled out and floored it and just disappeared. I was very confused, but still went to where we said, thinking they were maybe just getting something from their house. They lived in the town we met in, so maybe. They called, got no answer. But waited for, well, an embarrassingly long while. Called again, and this time the call didn't even go through. Eventually, I went home. checked them on the dating site, and either they deleted the account or they blocked me. I never figured out what happened. Everything seemed fine while we were there. I didn't show up looking completely different from my pictures. I only had recent ones, so it's not like I came in 10 years older than my page looked like. It happened to some people. I don't think I set any red flags, but it was so long ago I can't really comb through what happened because I don't remember much anymore. The messed up thing is that this has stuck with me for so long because even if they disappear halfway through the date and it was like 14 years ago now, it's still the only date I've ever been on. I did have one other person talk with me for a small amount of time on that site. One of her pictures had part of a tattoo on it. I thought I might have recognized what it was, and after a message or two, I brought it up and asked. It looked like something from an anime that I recognized. She responded, "Oh, everyone that is into anime is trash and unmatched." Messed up thing is that I kinda knew her because my roommate at the time was a mutual friend. He had gone to conventions with her where they had group cosplays with some other people. Then I tried apps a few years ago. No matches there at all, except for one person who messaged me saying that she only matched with me to tell me that I was the ugliest person I've ever seen and should just delete the app. Which I know I'm not exactly attractive, but that's a bit of an exaggeration, I think. Story 13. I matched with someone, and within 2 minutes, she sent this paragraph of what she wanted, including her phone number. I bite. Text her, and it seems to be going okay. Day later, she asked me if I would like to meet. I said sure. Do a quick Google Map search of the area, etc. Head out. I grab some McDonald's for myself and Bud and finally get there. The house looks like a hoarder's house. Crap. It's too late to turn back. She answers the door. I introduce myself. We go in. We go to her apartment, and it was horrible. It's cluttered and dark, and she has a full can of garbage in the living room. Like, what the heck? She puts on a movie, and I can't help but notice there's a rat mess and leaves with a cobweb-filled guitar in the corner. She doesn't offer water or anything. Gets up and makes sausages and just open-mouthed chews them and burps constantly. At this point, I've already plotted my escape. But as I'm about to leave, she asks, and I kid you not, "Can I have your McDonald's? It's probably cold that way, so you can get a fresh one." I freaking beeline for the door and jetted home. I forgot to block her, and the next day she texted me to see if I'd like to come over and cuddle. But she has a boyfriend. Huh? I blocked her ASAP. Freaking dating apps. I guess you could say she had a unique way of hosting guests. Story 14. It did not happen on an app per se, but I had a girl that had a friend of mine asked to come meet me. I talked to her online, but I'm shy and I don't really ask to meet people often or easily. We were at a LAN party too when this happened, so I was around a lot of people. She essentially walked into the building, came straight up to me and whispered into my ear that I've been making her moist for so long. It completely grossed me out. And yes, saying she was moist is a total understatement. My friend didn't see that and offered to take us out to eat, and she kept grabbing me from under the table. When we dropped her off at home, she asked me to come look at her computer to fix the keyboard, and she essentially threw herself onto me as soon as the door closed. It had super awkward, super weird vibes. I was able to get her off me and simmer down and leave. She would message me and try to get me to hang out for 10 years. She would keep finding me on various media sites and such. Story 15. Just one of a few, I guess, but this one would be the most recent. Matched with a real cute girl who seemed pretty active and was up for playing We're Not Really Strangers together at her place to break the ice. It wasn't until we were figuring out details that she brought it up. She was in some sort of nurse or medical school clinic rotation program and not even in town until afternoon the next day. Found it weird for her to be on board with meeting at her place first meetup and that she actually wasn't staying in town but rolled with it. Day of, I show up and she finally tells me she was only going to be in town for 4 weeks. The next 2 weekends she was going to be busy with friends or cousins anyway. Conversation was also rough because she was more fixated on either moving in and getting ready for work starting the next day, or would not stop complaining already about my city and could not wait for the next rotation. I get it, but come on. All we did then was watch half of episode 1 of Fallout, pick up dinner, and try to make fruitless conversation until she admitted she was more tired than expected, and we should call it here. Said our farewells and let you know where I'm freeze, and she unmatched me the next day without another word. Never ended up even playing that specific game with her, much less getting to help her pay for food when I offered. Walked away thinking that was a weird waste of my time, even if it only lasted all of 2 to 3 days. At least her dog was nice. Story 16. I got stood up once by a girl I matched with on Hinge. She was going through a bit of a depressive episode and had other things going on, but had still agreed to meet up at like 8:30. Texted her to confirm earlier in the day and she didn't get back to me until like 8. I sternly got on to her about that while also saying we need to push it back so I can get ready if you still want to meet. She agreed. I went out, texted her after the time had passed, and nothing. Which wasn't really an issue because I was going to the barcade anyway to say bye to the bartender, because it was her last night. I'd become a bit of a regular. That's not the surprising part. That comes in afterwards when I come across her IG by way of suggested follows. I check it out and she really knows her angles because she barely looked like the photos she had on her profile. So I'm kind of happy she stood me up because I would have been a bit annoyed that this unattractive girl showed up in place of the one I thought was coming. Story 17. In the middle of the night, I matched with a woman who looked stunning in her pictures. She invited me to her home. When she opened the door, I caught a faint glimpse of the woman from the photos. Now, she appeared as if she'd been on something for the past year. She still had some beauty and life in her, but it was evident she was just a week away from looking weird. My heart broke at that moment. I stepped into her apartment and we talked. She shared horrible stories. A very lonely woman with no friends or support. She wanted me to have intimacy with her, but I couldn't. I told her she was an amazing woman who deserved to be with people who love her and encouraged her to seek help. As I walked out of her house, she was crying. We didn't date for months afterward, and my heart still felt broken. It's hard to witness someone in such a state. I felt like I had stepped into someone's personal hell. Should have brought a sympathy card instead of protection. Story 18. I matched with another girl who I never even went out with. When she stalked and pestered me and my ex, also had the misfortune of matching with her, the WLW dating pool can be surprisingly small. For months, until she got arrested. Constant phone calls and texts with spoofed numbers so she was unblockable. Following us both home and work, keying my ex's car, texting links to videos, trying to trigger PTSD. It was awful. Again, I literally never even went out with her. We matched, agreed to meet up for coffee, but then she wanted to go to a club instead and I said no thanks. And trying to reschedule, all she wanted to do was go out to clubs and bars and that's not something I feel comfortable with for a first date. So I said I don't think this'll work. Hope you have a nice life and find someone who matches what you're looking for better. Story 19. In my defense, she was incredibly hot. I went on a date with a woman that mostly went great, flirting and talking about benign things like hiking and career goals. At the end of dinner, the check came. She was a little empathetic about not going Dutch, but some women use that as a test to make sure you're not terrible. So, whatever. But when I tipped 20%, she launched into a 10-minute lecture about how tipping rewards parasites and if people want to escape minimum wage jobs, they need to take pride in their work without reward. Blah, blah, blah. The date ended there, so I abstained from any further after-dinner activities. I was ready to move on, but the following weekend I guess she got intoxicated with friends and sent me pictures. I again repeat, she was really hot. I had also recently moved, so I'll admit I was generally a bit lonely. That afternoon, I told her I would be out of phone service because I was going fishing with a new friend, which was true. A friend with an urban name, as I imagined she would describe it. I get an essay text back from her about how if this was going to work, I needed to correct my peer group, blah, blah, blah. I blocked her and deleted the photos she sent because it made me ashamed. Story 20. Went on a date with a girl after chatting for a few days. 6 went great from my perspective, and she even said something about setting up a second date. I texted her later that night before going to bed when she dropped a bombshell on my lap. Turns out she has had a boyfriend for a while and was dating other people to test her love for him. I asked, what if he did the same thing to her? And she told me he never needs to know, wouldn't ever know, and he wouldn't do that to her because he loves me. More red flags than a parade went off in my head. I'm glad it ended there because I wasted more of my time. Had another interaction where we talked for about a weekend before finally scheduling a date. Not 5 minutes after we agreed on a time and place did she tell me, I can't do this. I have a boyfriend. I about gave up completely with online dating. Thankfully, less than a month later, I met my wife of 5 years. Story 21. Matched up and chatted for a couple days. Met up that Friday for a couple drinks. Ended up hitting it off and walking out to the parking lot together. She invited me to sit in her car with her to talk a little more and ended up giving me a whistle. Kept chatting after that for a few days. Like the following Tuesday, invited me to a local sports bar to hang out while she watched her friends play softball. I get there and she's sitting in a large group. Comes up, greets me with a kiss, and goes to grab me a drink. Like 20 minutes later, a guy in softball gear walks up and starts talking to her. He walks off to go play, and I ask, "What the hell?" Tells me that's just her husband and he's going to be busy playing for hours so we could have a few drinks and go out to the car again. I have no idea if he was aware. She was trying to start drama or just crazy. I went to the bathroom and dipped the hell out. Story 22. This was a long time ago. Long story short, I got catfished. Now, I have nothing against individuals with dwarfism. It was not as advertised, and when she showed up, I was obviously taken aback. And maybe I'm too nice. I figured the worst that could happen was having a nice conversation and a glass of wine, and I'd be out of there. In the middle of dinner, she pulls out a 2-inch thick binder full of lighting fixtures. I got catfished by a woman with dwarfism who simultaneously tried to sell me on some wild LED MLM scheme. Only date I've ever walked out of. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.